If you want to age well, not just live longer, but stay strong, sharp, look and feel energized, then what you're about to hear is some of the best information out there. Over the past year on the Honest channel, I've had the privilege of interviewing some of the most thoughtful voices in health and wellness, experts focused on sharing evidence-based, powerful and practical advice. This episode brings together some of the best insights of 2025 on the channel and podcast. Advice that can genuinely change how you age, how you feel, and how you live. I'm going to start with one of my favourite interviews of the year. Dr. Austin Perlmutter blew me away with his depth and range of knowledge around the factors that harm or support our brain health. Together with his father, David, a renowned neurologist, he wrote the book Brainwash, and this is what he had to say about one of the most overlooked but significant factors in determining how healthy our brain remains as we age.
Growing up, in the last couple of decades, muscle was something that was seen as more of an aesthetic appeal. So as a guy in college, you wanted to build muscle because it looked good. It wasn't a question of function. Granted, it'd be nice to be able to lift heavier weights, I suppose, on occasion, but there was never this conversation about, well, muscle is an active organ that is going to benefit your brain. That never came up. Yet that is exactly what the research is telling us. Higher muscle mass correlates with better brain health. It has a protective effect on our brains. And this is really important in the context of what it sounds like you're alluding to with your parents, which is that people lose skeletal muscle at a very rapid rate. So about 1% per year once you get to your middle age. And that means that by the time you get into your 80s, you may have lost over 50% of your skeletal mass. And this decrease in both the amount of muscle mass and the function of and health of our skeletal muscle correlates with higher rates of having dementia and cognitive decline. And let me just be specific about this. We're talking about something called sarcopenia, which is, again, the loss of function and mass of skeletal muscle. And in a 2024 meta-analysis, having sarcopenia correlated with a 56% increased risk of having mild cognitive decline, and having sarcopenia correlated with about a 300% increased risk for having Alzheimer's dementia. Beyond this, having sarcopenia correlates with a 57% increased risk for depression. And what's interesting about this, so granted, you'd say, well, obviously that matters, is that you can look at correlates of muscle strength, so grip strength, for example. And what you can see is that even just having a weaker grip strength, which is it tells you about kind of the health of your skeletal muscle, correlates with worse brain health. So it's not just a person, we think about this old, frail person with no muscle mass, and of course they're not super healthy. But even in younger ages, having less muscle strength correlates with worse brain health. So the fundamental piece of all of this is we think about all these other things we need to do, eat a healthy diet or exercise in general, for example, doing aerobic conditioning. We absolutely need to be thinking about how do we build up this savings bank or savings account to bank some brain health with our muscle. The more healthy skeletal muscle you have, the more your brain seems to be protected. And I think that has to be part of a brain-centric lifestyle plan, is building and maintaining healthy skeletal muscle.
Brilliant advice there from Dr. Perlmutter, and you're going to find the full version of each one of the interviews that we're featuring today linked in the description below this episode. Now on to my next guest. Here's the wonderful Dr. Tina Pearce, shedding light on how a very common but under-recognised and underdiagnosed condition, histamine intolerance, can wreak havoc with our skin, gut and health in general, contributing to a wide range of conditions, including rosacea, migraines, and digestive disorders.
So this was first put together as a syndrome, somebody linking all of the different systems and inflammation being the common theme between all of the systems. So whether it's bronchitis or sinusitis, or it's, IBS type symptoms with ulcerative colitis, or, all the inflammations, eczema, psoriasis, rosacea, all these inflamed conditions. And somebody pulled that together in the 80s. And it was given a name of histamine intolerance and mast cell activation in the 90s. And it was in 2007, so a long time had gone without it being sort of flagged up to people, to the medical profession in particular, and to the patients, very importantly, until 2007, when 3 case studies were published in the medical literature. So now the chances of all the doctors seeing these 3 case studies is very, very slim indeed. So most doctors didn't know anything about it. They've never heard of it. And yet they are seeing it constantly in their clinics, in their GP practices, in their gastroenterology clinics, in their neurology clinics, in their headache clinics, or, they're seeing it, dermatology, etc. But they weren't aware of it. So they couldn't join up the dots. And it is a little bit like a dot to dot. And once you start joining up the dots, you get a very clear picture of what's going on everywhere in the person, and then how to help them, which is the most important thing. The diagnosis is by trial of treatment. And if you respond well to the treatment and the lifestyle changes, then it's a confirmation that you're barking up the right tree, or you're going,
exactly.
and you found the answer. So, the treatments are very much to do with lifestyle changes, because obviously we want to encourage people to have as natural an approach as possible. And that's important. However, pharmaceuticals are important and can be very helpful in this condition, but they're also very safe to take, and they're very sort of relatively cheap. So it's type 1 antihistamines, type 2 antihistamines.
And can I just clarify for people there, the type 1 is what we think of for what we use for hay fever.
That's
and
right.
The type 2 is more active in the gut, which
That's
is the
right.
famotidine, the pepsid. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, usually we try people on type 1 and type 2. Not everybody needs to take both for relief, but some people find they do, or one is better than the other. And then we've also got some mast cell stabilizers, which can be very, very useful. Something like ketotifen, which actually calms the mast cells down. So whilst the type 1 and type 2 antihistamines block the receptors in the various tissues to stop the histamine that's being released affect those tissues and cause inflammation and reactions, the mast cell stabilizers are going to the root cause and are trying to calm the mast cells down and stopping them from releasing those cytokines in the first place.
Another conversation I loved this year was the one I had with physician and all-round enthusiast for life, Sir Muir Gray, who at 81 has lost none of his humour or his passion for finding ways to improve public health and the way we age. And in this excerpt from our recent interview, he explains why it's not aging in and of itself that's a problem, it's some key lifestyle factors that accelerate decline and the risk of disease.
And I thought I'd just tell you the facts of life. Remember the facts of life? The birds and the bees, we used to call it, where babies come from. But I'm telling you now the facts of life 2.0. What happens to us as we live longer? And the science is now getting very clear that aging is a normal biological process. But aging doesn't cause major problems until the late 90s. You need a bit of luck. But look at people like Her Majesty, for example. People are able to do things and in their late 90s. But 3 other processes are taking place that affect us as we live longer. And the first of these is loss of fitness, physical and mental. And loss of physical fitness starts for most people about 22 when they get their first job.
Wow.
And you and I are doing this very dangerous thing called sitting.
Yes.
And we've not evolved to sit with lots of calories everywhere. We've evolved to run about and put on fat quickly if any calories become available. So the whole environment has changed. It's not lifestyle and people being lazy. It's just where the whole environment is different. So loss of fitness. And physical fitness, there's 4 aspects of physical fitness, beginning with the letter S: strength, stamina, suppleness, and skill. Now, the effects of aging, the biological effects of aging are twofold. One is the loss of maximum ability, maximum heart rate, for example. The second is loss of resilience, the ability to respond to a change in temperature or a trip or stumble or inactivity. Now, loss of fitness means a loss of maximum ability and also loss of resilience, how long it takes you to recover from climbing 3 flights of stairs. So loss of fitness and aging have been confused until very recently. But now the American College of Sports Medicine produced a big report saying exercise is medicine. And the British colleges of medicine said exercise is the miracle cure. So activity is key. Mental activity is also very important. And we might have a chance to discuss what we call retirement at present, although I'm changing the name to Renaissance, and the change would take place at that age. So that's aging, lots of fitness, disease, and most diseases are not caused by genetics, but by the environment we live in and how we respond to it, and therefore we can reduce the risk of disease. And disease is very often complicated by accelerated loss of fitness because we do too much for people.
Can I go back and pick up on something that I think will surprise a lot of people that you started out by saying? You said that aging shouldn't be a problem until our 90s. Now, of course, most people would count themselves very lucky to make it to their 90s. The average life expectancy is considerably below that. So are you saying really that it is that loss of fitness, too much sitting, inadequate diet that has caused the key issues for us here? And really, we should be living to our 90s if we could reverse that situation, move more, eat better.
Yeah, but remember, the people, as I understand it, who are engaged with us now will be people in their 60s, 70s, 80s. But by the time you reach 60, the expectation of life for 60 is about 30 years. The expectation of life at 70 is about 20. So if we're speaking to people like us, I'm 81, then the expectation of life of 80 is about 10 years. We see, but there's the fourth factor. So there's aging, loss of fitness, disease, complicated by accelerated loss of fitness, and social factors. Deprivation, for example, is a major factor. And then the other one is ageism, the negative thinking. Oh, well, no, I'd like to disagree with her. She's 84. Or, oh, let's do something for her. Let's do something for him. He wouldn't. So ageism, which affects almost all of us, and which we have to fight, and which you're fighting through this your wonderful channel. You're an anti-ageist movement.
Yes, I am. And anti-aging has become, there's a bit of a movement trying to push back against using that term. But I believe in that term strongly, as I'm sure you do, because what we're looking to fight is not the passing of our years, which we're fortunate to have, but the negative effects of aging, which if we do nothing, will completely swallow us up.
Sorry, I was not clear. I've got a speech defect. I come from Glasgow. And it's ageism, AGEISM. Yes. I was talking about. Yes. That's the issue, more than aging.
From ourselves and other people.
But you're combating. You're an anti-ageism move. It's fantastic what you're doing.
Thank you, and what you're doing. I think ageism, we think about it in the workplace and so on, but of course there's studies that have showed that we can be ageist in our own attitudes, and that people who have a positive attitude towards aging and expect to live well for longer are generally the ones who end up doing that. So I think there's something like a 7-year lifespan difference between people who had a very positive attitude towards aging and those who expected that would involve frailty, disease, decline, and had that negative attitude. Now to my next guest, and after working in the emergency care for 25 years, Dr. Jonathan Sullivan left the ER to practice a very different form of medicine after spotting a particular pattern of unhealthy aging in his patients that he chose to tackle through a very different prescription. Here he explains why.
When I was working as an attending physician in the emergency department, I began to appreciate that there were certain patterns of unhealthy aging that tended to go together. And I subsequently came to call that the sick aging phenotype. And that's the metabolic syndrome, which is diabetes and high blood pressure and heart disease, and visceral and truncal obesity, and high cholesterol, vascular disease, and frailty, which is the loss of muscle and bone tissue, which basically means you're easier to break, along with polypharmacy, which is basically being on too many medicines, polypharmacy, which is an epidemic in older populations, and medical dependence, where people basically, they spend a significant portion of their lives in and out of doctors' offices and hospitals and emergency departments and things like that. These things all tend to go together, and they have a significant negative impact on our quality of life as we enter our so-called golden years. I began to put all that together, and I found it pretty offensive.
But at that stage, when you were noticing this, well, at what point were you able to put together that actually muscle might play a significant role in this? Because we're hearing more about this now, but back sort of 10, 20, 30 years ago, really muscle didn't come into the equation when we thought of health.
I'm sad to say that when I was in medical school, we got hardly any exercise physiology at all. We got hardly anything about healthcare or preventative medicine at all. And when I did start thinking about this from a medical perspective, and also from a personal perspective, because I was starting to get older, I also looked at it through the prism of my research, which was about cell death in brain tissue after injury, and about how cells die and basically how brain cells kill themselves. And I saw some parallels between programmed cell death or apoptosis in the brain after an injury or after any other kind of injury, and in humans, right, who kind of undergo a sort of human apoptosis. As we get older, we sort of like devolve, and we lose tissue, and we sort of, the second half of our life can be this process of like self-disassembly, which is what programmed cell death is. So I saw a kind of a parallel there, and that led me to the exercise science literature, which I'd kind of stumbled on in the course of my research anyway. And in the exercise science literature, I found a vast world of data that I'd never been exposed to as a physician about the importance of exercise, and particularly the importance of exercise in aging populations. And it was a real revelation to me. And so I began looking for patterns in that literature and ways that I could primarily impact myself and perhaps my patients. And that led me on this whole journey that ultimately culminated in this clinic and the book that I wrote and what's become a second career of doing exercise medicine with older adults.
And you mentioned your book there, The Barbell Prescription. What were really the key messages that you wanted to get across to people from that book?
I wanted to write the definitive text on this issue, and I think I did, and I think it still is. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that I had a wonderful co-author, Andy Baker, who wrote the programming section of the book, or he provided the programs and we wrote the programming section together. He's a master programmer, and he taught me, he was one of my teachers when I was getting into this, trying to learn how to do strength training for older adults, because there are differences, and you talk about some of these quite beautifully in your video. You talk about the adaptations that have to be made, the accommodations that have to be made for older adults. So I wanted to write it, and I wanted to write the why, like why you have to do this, why getting old doesn't have to be a process of getting progressively sicker and sicker. I wanted to why exercise is the best medicine for healthy aging, why the best formulation of that medicine is strength training, and why barbells are the best route of administration for that particular formulation of exercise medicine. And so that's the first part of the book. The second part of the book is, what are the overall contours of what a strength training, barbell-based strength training practice for older adults should look like. And And so we sketched that out, why we use these particular exercises, the exercises that your parents are using. Why do we use those exercises? Why do we program them the way that we do? What's involved in recovery, which is really the linchpin of the entire thing, right? You don't get stronger by lifting weights, you get stronger by recovering from lifting weights. And it's recovery that brings in all of the lifestyle factors. It's recovery that brings in the proper nutrition and the hydration and the active rest and a nap and good sleep and avoidance of toxins and all of that. So I always like to say that exercise is part of a healthy lifestyle, but training is a healthy lifestyle because it integrates everything. So that was part 2. And then part 3 was the programs. That's where we got down to the nubby nitty gritty, like what you talked about in your video. Like it's, 3 sets of 5 reps, increasing the weight a little bit at a time every session or every other session. And that's your linear progression. And later on, how things keep getting a little bit more complicated, because as you get closer to your age-adjusted genetic potential, you have to get a little bit more complicated with your programming. No problem. We can help you with that. I think we did a pretty good job. And I think that the book has influenced a lot of people. And I like to think that it's helped to push the zeitgeist in the direction that you're indicating here, that this is the way to go for healthy aging. Conditioning is important, mobility is important, but strength training is the cornerstone of exercise medicine for healthy aging. There's no doubt in my mind.
And finally, here's world record holding ninja athlete Ginny McColl, who at 73 shares the power of challenging ourselves and pushing beyond our comfort zone to squeeze the very best out of aging.
This is the best time of my life. I think Guinness really opened up the world to me, where I now talk to you in the UK. I talk to South Africa, Poland, Mexico, Canada, somebody in China, India. It's just like we all across the planet seem to have the same difficulty in getting seniors up and moving. In just the obesity problems, and our diet, all those kind of things seem to be universal. And there are these groups of people in every country that are like trying to show the benefits, the health benefits, to the heart, to the brain. I just read something interesting. I think I saw it in a podcast, where the anterior mid cingulate cortex in your brain, it's in the back here, grows when you challenge yourself. So in other words, if I do the same exercise every single day, or if I get up and go to a class that I don't really want to go to, but I'm forcing myself to, just think of this, your brain is growing.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, I like that
That's
too.
wonderful.
And another one I a lot of times tell people is that, I climb ropes a lot, and I've gotten up pretty high. But the first time I was doing it, I may have gotten up to about, I don't know, maybe 35 feet. I have a harness, and my daughter was filming it, and I was like, okay, I'm ready to come down on the harness. And she was doing, do one more. And I'm thinking, oh, I didn't make it to 40 feet. Okay, so I climbed a couple more, and I stopped, and I said, okay, I'm ready to go down. She goes, do one more. And I'm like, I haven't made it to 40. Well, I have to make it to 40. So I took a couple more, and then I said, that's it. And I came down, I said, Jessie, why did you keep telling me to do one more? And she said, because that's when you get your greatest strength. So it's same thing with a pull-up. If you go, and you just drop, why don't you just hold that moment? And my arms will be shaking, and just hold it a bit longer. That's when you're getting your strongest.
If there's one thing this year has reinforced for me, it's this. Aging well isn't about hacks. It's about non-negotiable habits, consistency, and good information. In 2026, the Honest Channel is going deeper than ever, with monthly episodes of Rebuilding Mum and Dad, continuing to follow my parents' journey as they build strength in their 80s. We'll also be bringing you more interviews with groundbreaking experts, the latest research alongside honest insights from my own experience experiences, what I'm trying, what I'm questioning, what the evidence actually shows, and what's genuinely worth our time and money. And if you don't want to miss what's coming next, make sure you're subscribed or following, and sign up to my monthly newsletter in the description below so you can get my latest content direct to your inbox. And if this episode helped you, please like, share, or leave a comment. It really helps this channel reach more people who want to age well too. And thank you for being part of this community. I'll see you next time.